There was a thread somewhere called "I hate Will Buxton," and I think I called him a dick to his face. And I did beat Latifi though on merit. He said you were really harsh about my driving in Singapore, and I said, yeah, that's because you drove like shit. I mean, fuck you guys. How dare you fall in love with a sport? I can't say anything to my daughter because she's just like, whatever, Dad, you're just a meme.
What's up, Vankers?
Hello, Vangas!
How is everybody doing?
Are you doing good? Are you so upset because you didn't get a little episode yesterday, you little greedy pigs? You need an episode every Monday. You say, where's our episode? Where's your episode? Guess what? It's worth the wait this week, okay? We've been watching this man cook for the last 10 minutes, trying to get his technology right. He was looking a little bit like the Alpine 2024 car for a second, but guess what, baby? We're on track, and he's about to be Max Verstappen in this interview, and he can tell us a little bit about that because this guy raced him on track in 2014 and called that he was going to be a world championship before anyone knew who Max Verstappen was. We have Will Buxton on the podcast.
Hello, boys. How are you?
We're better now that we got you in the can, at least one word, because I don't think anybody, when we said we had you on the pod, we announced it. Everybody thought it was an April Fool's joke. So
No, and it very nearly was looking like an April Fool's joke when all of my technology shut down when we were due to start recording. Thank you, by the way. Can I just say thank you for explaining that I am the Alpine of this situation, because apparently that means I'm overweight. Charming. So, poorly designed and overweight. Thank you. Absolutely charming, and yet accurate.
Yeah, and you do have a strong nose, which we love, which the Alpine also has, and is worth the extra weight.
Large flat nose, overweight, aerodynamically inefficient. That's me, age 43. Thanks for reminding me.
Well, you look. I gotta say, you look fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks. I've had a month off, so yeah, full of wine and chocolate. It's we
were watching you on Off the Grid, and we're like, he looks the fucking same. So
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Thank you. God, that was a long time ago.
Yes.
That was a really long time ago. It was good fun.
The amount of time, the 10,000 hours, like you've been in the game. We're newbies on the block. You know, there's this, which hey, guess what? You're responsible for, because, you know, you were part of the fucking mainline heroin of Formula One that was directed into our veins, and now now we're addicted. But you've been addicted before it was cool, before it was, before anyone knew who the fuck any of these guys were, or any of this world was, especially on the American side. But I assume on the UK side as well, you've been in this game for a very long time. So I think I want to hear a little bit like how you fell in love with F1, your road in. Like, how did you get to be where you are today?
Oh man, we're going right back.
Yeah.
So, like, I didn't come from a racing family. My dad wasn't massively into Formula One or anything. I think I've told this story before, but the first time I remember seeing race cars was my parents took me to a hill climb when I would have been about like 4 or 5 years old. Mm-hmm. And it was just like the noise and the color and the smell of Castrol, oil, and just the terrifying nature of it. Like as a kid, you sat next to race cars for the first time, and they're scary, right? They're really, really scary. And then there's a person in the middle of it doing something really, really cool. And that day I fell in love with race cars, and then I started watching Formula One because it was always on Sunday lunchtimes in the UK. It was part of. We had a show called Grandstand in the UK on the BBC, which was like all the major sports goings on over the weekend, whether it was rugby, football, cricket, tennis, over Wimbledon or whatever, and Formula One. And we had this legendary commentator in the UK called Murray Walker, who was the voice of Formula One, and kind of like globally for a long time was pretty much seen as the voice of Formula One for decades. And so Sunday lunchtimes became watching the Grand Prix with my parents after a Sunday lunch. and my sister, being really bored by it, but me just totally loving it. And that was, I fell in love with it, but so that means I was falling in love with it through the mid to late 1980s. So we're talking Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna, Nigel Mansell. That was my era. That's where I really.
Who is your guy?
Yeah.
Senna.
Senna?
Like 1,000%. Yeah.
Even as a limey, you weren't pulling.
Oh
for...
my God, yeah.
Really?
Because he was the man.
Okay.
He was like Dale Earnhardt in NASCAR, was the intimidator.
Mm-hmm.
Senna was the intimidator. People were like, okay, he's coming up behind me. Either I kind of get out his way or I'm probably not finishing this race. And he was just, he could do things with a car that either didn't look physically possible. Like it looked like it was, I remember we were talking years before, CGI and all of that, but it looked like it wasn't possible.
Right.
Or he would do something that was just, everything about watching him race was exciting. Because there was always the possibility of something magical. And so I totally fell in love with Senna. He was who I absolutely idolized.
But you didn't want to be Senna. Did you kind of sound like, did you want to be Murray Walker? Or was that what you were kind of envisioning?
No. Because like Murray did Murray's job. So there was never the dream to be Murray, because I never thought that opportunity would ever arise. I developed this dream when Senna was killed. Actually, my dad bought me my first copy of Autosport magazine, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to write about it. And so set myself this crazy dream of writing about Formula One, which I think my parents thought was kind of mad, but they totally just backed me and said, well, you love it and you want to do it, so just go for it. Just aim for it and work hard and do everything you can. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, we'd like you to try and get a qualification that means you might actually get a proper job at some point. So I went to university and did a degree and all of that, just in case this kind of crazy dream didn't materialize. And here we are, God, 23, 24 years into doing this mad thing. And now I'm on TV talking about it, which is the weirdest thing in the world.
What was that moment? I mean, as a young sports fan and your idol, dies in this horrific way. I mean, what was I would try to think of, especially when you're young, it's like, I remember watching like my team lose and crying and like being so upset and idolizing certain players. And the closest thing that we have, it kind of feels like when Kobe Bryant died. But that was after his career. But I remember, you go around Los Angeles, there's murals of him everywhere. And, he meant so much to so many people. What was how devastating was that for you as a kid?
For me, it was huge. And it was weird because, as a kid, you lose grandparents or members of family. And that's very painful and that hurts. But the thing, the biggest loss I remember from my childhood was Ayrton Senna, because I thought he was immortal. Yeah. I just thought he was superhuman. And so I think the reality that motorsport was dangerous, that these guys could be killed doing this thing that I worshiped them for, was really kind of sobering and actually taught me a lot at that. I mean, I was 13 when he died, so I was, becoming a teenager. But it was one of those real kind of life moments of, oh shit, death is real and way more than any family member dying. It really sort of impacted me and made me realize I think that the kind of the real depths of mortality. But it set me on this path of wanting to write about Formula One, because the journalists who'd written about it around his death had made me feel some sort of solace and understanding, and they got it because my mates didn't understand it, because none of them liked Formula One. They all liked soccer or rugby. No, and their heroes weren't dropping down dead on the football field, so they didn't get it. That I had no touch point through my friends, and it was those journalists who made me feel connected to the sport, and I was like, that's that's what I want to do. I want to make that geeky 13-year-old kid whose mates don't really fully understand him. I want to make that connection. I want to make them feel understood and tell the stories of this sport that I love. Because as you guys said at the top, even in the UK, it was big in the UK because so many teams are based here, so many world champions come from here, so many engineers, mechanics, designers come from the UK. But Formula One's always been this niche thing. It's never had the same support as soccer or rugby or cricket, because it is quite an elite sport. It's quite a kind of middle class kind of, and also most sports you can go and play. You go into the street, you can kick a ball around, or you can go and pitch a ball and hit it with a stick and pretend you're at Yankee Stadium or whatever, But you can't go and pretend you're a Formula One driver. I did as a kid. I'd jump into a cardboard box and, with my crayons, draw on the outside of it and pretend it was a McLaren or something. But that's the closest you're going to get. You can't go out into the garden and actually play. So it is niche, or was niche, and I felt that connection through the journalists that I read, and that really is what inspired me and what motivated me to go on and study and go and work.
And how does it feel now that you had this dream of connecting with 13-year-old nerdy boys in England, and now you've connected with millions of people who didn't even know what Formula One was, them and beyond.
That's wild. That's totally wild, and it totally blows me away. I never thought I would ever have the opportunity to do television. It was just a massive mistake that's kind of seen me through the last 15 years. The most fun, and all I've ever kind of wanted to do is just talk about this thing that I love, and the fact that I got to be a part of to start with, Speed Channel and NBC, and then get pulled into working with F1, and because of that have this role to play with Drive to Survive. And now when you go to races and people, they're there because of Drive to Survive, they've been pulled in because of it. It's a lovely feeling, and it's nuts. It's absolute. I can't really explain it. It's just been a crazy mad whirlwind these last 5-6 years.
And can you walk us through like that, how that happened, how you went from just because I'm a writer, and how that evolution went from like, you're punching out articles, you're meeting deadlines, you're just a byline to just becoming a personality.
So I remember the first major article I wrote for Formula One magazine when I started there, like literally straight out of university. I did politics at uni, and I wrote my thesis on the politics of Formula One, which my lecturers thought was absolute turd, and it was. It was dreadful. I found it not long ago. It was awful. But they let me do it for some reason, nearly failed me off it. But I sent it to David Tremaine at Formula One magazine, and he was like, love it. It's weird, but, love that you did this. Come and do a couple of weeks work experience with us, which I did, and then I never left. And I ended up working there for a couple of years as a staff writer. Gotcha. And then the magazine closed down. I lived in a camper van for a year, driving to all the races, just trying to keep my head above the water, trying to keep in, trying to make connections and get to know people and not let this dream die. Because I was 23 years old, and I'd been doing my dream job for 18 months and just been told, that's it, the magazine's dead, you're out of a job, dream over. So I went traveling in a camper van and drove to all of the European races just to try and keep it alive. And at the end of that year, I got offered the role as press officer for GP2, which was being launched. It was a new version of what we now call Formula 2. And so I went to be press officer there. So I worked with Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton, when they were young, coming through the junior formulas and PR'd them for the championship. And then after 3 years, went back to journalism again. And one day I get a call completely out of the blue because they didn't have anyone to do commentary on a GP2 race. And they were like, you know more about GP2 than anybody. Can you do commentary? I'm like, I've never done commentary. And they're like, yeah, but you talk so much. And I was like, okay. I've done karaoke. I can hold a microphone, but that's about it. They were like, just chat, but do practice and we'll see how you go. So did practice. They were like, we love it. Do qualifying and the race you're going out live. Okay. So did that. And then at the end of it, they said, we want you to come back and do the full season next year. And then, I did. So I did that for a full year. And at the end of that year, I get a call from the States and they were like, we take the world feed. So we hear you. We put our own commentary on top of it later. But we've been listening to your commentary and we need a new pit lane reporter for Formula One. Do you want to do it? And that was how I started in TV. Wow. And it was all so literally I have never had any formal training for any job I've ever done. It has all been just
learn as you go.
Yeah, and chance and here's an opportunity. Do you want to give it a go? Yes, please, let's go. And that door kind of just opens a little bit and you slam your foot in it to stop it from closing and pull yourself through. And that's been it for like 20 years.
Can we just drill down on that year you spent as a groupie, basically following? Can we just drill down on that for 1 second? You just went like I followed around Formula One, in a camper van for a year.
Yeah.
So was it like a caravan, like the In-Betweeners? What was that like? So
no, it was like a little Volkswagen minivan. With a little sofa in the back, little couch that folded down into a bed, had a little sink and a fridge, which was never full of anything because I could only afford to either eat or pay for gas. And I couldn't afford both. So I would turn up at races and be, gaunt and no energy. And my colleagues, bless them, would take me out for dinner and feed me. And the teams would bring me to their motorhomes and feed me up and basically fatten me up over a race weekend so that I wouldn't die over the next 10 days until the next race. Because all I could afford was the gas to get to the next race. It was amazing though, because every weekend I camped in the campsites with the fans.
Okay.
So every weekend I'm with people I don't know, meeting people from different countries, supporting different drivers, different teams, whatever. And every day they would send me off to the paddock with questions. Oh, what's this guy really like? Or, what happens here? And what's this? And have you ever been here? And, and so I'd go into the paddock. I'd do my job writing for a newspaper in the UK. And I'd come back and I'd tell them all the stories of my day. And that has informed every single thing I've done since, because it's always about, for me, it's always been about going in there to come back at the end of the day and say, okay, so this is what happened and this is what it's all about. And and to take them with me, because I had this pass, this thing around my neck that allowed me the access that they paid for their tickets to be there, but I had this amazing level of access that they didn't. So I thought it was really important to be able to give them, that kind of that insight. And
you're
that's
like
all
the kid running home from school and then telling their family about their day. Like, oh my God, this happened. And then this happened. And then he said this. And then she said, that's amazing.
Right. And that's the job, that's what I've always seen the job as being, is I get this ridiculous opportunity that I'm so grateful for. And it's the greatest honor and the greatest pleasure to be able to run home shouting at the top of my voice, oh my God, I've had the best day because of all of this stuff. And I remember, when I first started out on US TV, 15 odd years ago, I remember there was a thread somewhere called "I Hate Will Buxton," and there's like millions of them now, but it was the first one, and so it hurt. But somebody had said, he's so disingenuous. Nobody is that enthusiastic all the time. And I was like, I couldn't make this shit up. Like I don't have the energy or I could not keep that up if it wasn't real. The energy and the joy and the enthusiasm may be grating to some people, it may be annoying, but it's genuine. And the day that I walk into that paddock and I'm not genuinely excited to be there, I will go and do something else, because I don't deserve to be there anymore. I think it's so important to just be yourself and be true and be honest and be, what I am is I'm just raw and I'm me. And some people like that, some people hate that, but I can't be anything but me. And I couldn't put that on. It would be draining. Oh my God.
Ironically, though, you're such a devoted fan. You've been a fan your whole life. You're from England, right? But in some ways, you represent this sort of new, earnest fandom. I think that a lot of people latch onto. I mean, can you? Because we don't get the same. But we get the hate from the Europeans that are like, who are these new American fans? From someone who's been on sort of both sides of the fence, can you sort of explain this hatred of the new fan, of the new earnest?
There is nothing that breaks my heart more than this. I mean, fuck you guys. How dare you fall in love with a sport? How dare you?
Right.
How dare you? The thing is, everyone had their first race.
Right.
Everyone. No matter what sport you follow, everyone had their first match. Everyone had their first game when they turned up and they knew nothing. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you've been watching it for 20 years. Great. But think back to that day when you did watch your first race and you didn't know what the flags meant and you didn't know how qualifying worked, or, you didn't know what a safety car was, or all of those things. You learn through time. There's a bit of gatekeeping, I think. And I think, what we spoke about before about how it used to be a niche sport. Mm-hmm. If you were an F1 fan, you had your little clique, you had your little crew, and it was quite special because it was just your thing. Now it's huge. And maybe for some, I'm not going to say all, but for some fans of that, maybe of that ilk, they're like, well, who are these people coming in and stealing my thing, and they don't really understand it. And rather than saying, this is so great, now there's so many more people I get to hang out with and chat about my favorite thing to, they're like, no, you're not allowed. I don't, I'm completely the opposite. I'm like, come on in. Like, the water's great, come and have fun and enjoy it because it's the best sport in the world. I love it. I love everything about it. I've never understood, if you're a fan of something, why would you not welcome people who are getting into it? Why would you not want to take them by the hand and say, come with me, let me show you how this works because it's super cool and then we get to enjoy it together instead of, oh, so you're new. Stefano Domenicali, who's the big boss of F1, he came out with this amazing statistic last year because they'd done all the research. 1 in 3 F1 fans now, F1 viewers, as we understand it from the data, have been watching Formula One for 5 years or less.
Yeah,
1 in 3. That means 1/3 of the F1 viewership never saw Sebastian Vettel in a competitive car. They never saw Michael Schumacher race, let alone Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost or Alan Jones or, God, Jackie Stewart, Jim Clark, Fangio. There's 75 years of history to this sport. And if you've been watching for 5, there's no way you're going to know all of that. There's no way you're going to have the context and the knowledge. And you can't just imagine it. You can't create it out of nothing. So I don't understand. And, we live in this horrible social media age where people are very quick to judge and very quick to put down and say very hurtful, spiteful things. And to do that to someone who's trying to understand and fall in love with this thing that you also love, I don't know why anyone would do that. It confuses. Honestly, if you come from a time when people didn't understand Formula One and you were outcast because you liked Formula One, to suddenly have people wanting to know about it, you can't then turn around and go, oh, no, but you didn't want to know about it before. Like, come on, grow up.
I think it's a bit of the, it's like I paid my dues. You just get to waltz in while it's good. But, that's for them and their relationship with God and themselves and the higher power. Well, so I want to get into a little bit so then when you have access to this world, so you were the groupie during what, Alonso's first year?
No, 2004. So it was Michael's last championship year.
I see. Yeah.
Well, I mean, was that just like Darth Vader music every week? Was that
So here's the thing. I first started writing in 2002, and that was the year that Michael Schumacher won the championship in France, French Grand Prix, which I believe that year happened in June. Now, we think that the Verstappen era of dominance is something, but when you're looking at the next 4 months thinking, what are we going to talk about because the championship's already been won? Then you got an issue. But the mad thing is, I was going back because I've been doing a lot of research on recent history recently, and Michael won the championship, and when you look back on it, you think if you weren't Michael Schumacher and Ferrari between 2000 and 2004, you didn't stand a chance, and yet a third of the races were won by other people, whether it was Montoya or Ralph Schumacher in the Williams, or whether it was Coulthard and Hakkinen in the McLarens, or Fernando starting to come through in the Renault at the end of that period. There were or bloody hell, Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Jordan. Like there were other winners quite regularly, but it just felt like I think there was a year Michael got on the podium. Yeah, there was a year Michael was on the podium every single Grand Prix. Which is just bonkers. Absolutely mad.
What was the wildest shit you saw? Like, what was the wildest campground you were in?
Oh, France.
France?
Manicourt. Yeah, Manicourt. So up at Manicourt, there was basically just fields behind the track, and up towards the hairpin, there was a campsite that held, I believe it was 40,000 people. So it was like being at a festival, and it was insane. I don't think for that entire year I didn't spend a single night sober. The Dutch. I mean, even though like Jos Verstappen was racing for a bit of it, Max's dad, but not all of it. He was kind of in and out, and even without a driver, they would still be there handing out beers to everybody that wanted to come along. The Finns would come along with these huge lorries that had saunas on the back of them. AC/DC was pretty much the soundtrack to most of the campsites. There was this amazing contraption they had. I remember in the French Grand Prix campsite, which was like a milk churn, and they would wedge a basketball into the top of the milk churn, and then they'd put, I don't know what it was, dry ice or something in the bottom of it. So the pressure built up and then shot this basketball out of the top like a freaking cannon, right? And there's like 10 of you lined up, so drunk you can't see straight, and you've got to run and try and catch the basketball. But the great thing is you're running through a campsite, so you're tripping over guy ropes or running through people's bonfires or whatever it is. Trying to catch this basketball, you'll trip just before the basketball bounces, which it will do, and rebound into your face. So there's black eyes, there's blood, it was the most fun. I loved it. Monza was brilliant. I camped up at Lesmo in Monza, and I made myself a promise that Sunday morning I would be up at the dawn, so the sun is just peeking out over the trees, and the ladders went up onto the wall, and we're all bombing over the wall and then running away from the police and the police dogs, and getting in, and then they would climb up the trees so the police couldn't get to them. They'd climb up the trees, they'd climb up the advertising hoardings, they'd jump on top of houses. None of them had tickets. I didn't mind getting caught because I had my pass, so I'd be all right. But that adrenaline rush and that kind of that part of being the fan and being like, yeah. And then once the race was over, I ran onto the grid and I got onto the side of that Ferrari banner, that big, heart-shaped Ferrari banner, shaking that underneath the podium. That was, that was something. But I was in my early 20s. I loved it. And the thing was, back then, that year in the camper van, I thought that was it. I thought, end of the year, there's no way I'm getting a job, right? This is it. The dream is ultimately over. So I'm just going to have fun. And I don't think I made a very good name for myself in the paddock, like professionally.
Right. Because why does Will have a black eye? And
exactly.
I think there's blood seeping through his pants.
I do remember because I was camping, and Belgium, it rains every year, and I traipsed in from the campsite, and I'd been walking in like up to my knees in mud. I was cold. I hadn't eaten in like 3 days. And I walked into McLaren's motorhome, and they were lovely, and the catering were wonderful, and we were all great friends. But I walked in just like a drowned rat, and mud up to my knees, just wanted a coffee, and I walked in, and Ron Dennis was on the top floor in the old motorhome, and I just remember him looking down, taking one look at me, and shaking his head, and like this, and I was like, okay, so I just like turned on my heels and walked. It's like you are not bringing mud into my pristine motorhome.
Okay, so you're getting drunk with the masses, and you're living this double kind of like life. But then you get this job as the GP2 press officer. Whilst in what I think Lewis won in his first year there, right?
So Rosberg was the first champion,
okay.
And then Hamilton was the second champion.
Okay, so what was we've heard you say that something happened with you and Rosberg at the time, that there was because what's interesting to me is
we hated each other.
Well, what's fascinating to me is that like you're with the people. Right, and then you have this like connection, like I'm doing this for the people, but then you're having to report on shit. You're having to like deal with the actual drivers, and like this push and pull of like the fan. And we, now that as our profile is rising a little bit, all of a sudden we're having to like have FaceTime with some of these guys, and we're having to like navigate this like 1 foot with the fandom
people.
and 1 foot with the people that are actually making this product. So I'm curious about how that happened. Like what happened with you and Rosberg? Like why was there bad blood?
Oh, that was just so that was awkward because I was running the PR for the championship.
Right.
And Nico was going to be our first champion, and we just didn't get on. But I just didn't understand his sense of humor. It was a very kind of awkward sense of humor, and halfway through the year, I just kind of had enough, and I was like, I'm not even going to try and talk to this guy anymore because he's just a dick. Like I'm not even going to try, which is really hard because I had to send someone else to get his quotes for the press releases, and you've got to get on with we had 24 drivers in the first year, so you got to try. You have to get on with all of them. Your job is to promote the championship. You can't have favorites. You can't have ones you like and don't like. You got to like them all. And I think I called him a dick to his face, and and he just was just like, whoa, what's going on? And I was just like, you're always a dick to me, and he was just like, no, and I just realized then it was his sense of humor, and he was just a really
well. That's kind of his vibe. It's like he's like, I don't get why Lewis doesn't like me. We can make up at any point.
So you see that up there? That's Nico's shirt from that year, which he sent to me. After he won the championship.
How did you bury the hatchet with him? How did you make up?
We just I don't know. Like you're in your early 20s. You just make up. You just go, oh sorry. Oh maybe I was the one that was being a dick.
Oh, that's nice.
But then I got through to Formula One.
Yeah.
And Nico is now a Formula One driver.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm back to being a journalist again. And I remember getting into an interview, and he was being a dick. And I said, and I stopped the dictaphone halfway through, and I was like, right, look, we can just, if you're going to be like this, I'm just going to go and talk to someone else because I know when you're in this kind of mood. So like, I'm just going to go. And he was like, no, I'm sorry. Okay, come back. I always liked him. He was such a smart guy. He would say the same thing to every single TV crew, but he would say it in a different way. And because he spoke 6 languages, he could turn it on with all the different crews in it. So he would say exactly the same thing to the German and the British press, but he'd say it to the German press in a way that they would feel sorry for him, and he'd say it to the British press in a way that would make them hate him. And he was absolutely brilliant at playing the game. But I also know how much he had to sacrifice in order to win that title of himself and his family life. And so when he did retire, having won the title, I was surprised in the immediate sort of moment, and then kind of really happy for him that he'd just gone, I've given everything I can, and I can't do that again. So I'm off. I thought that was great.
Yeah, we're kind of obsessed with Nico. We're like, because like he's after
the
our
driver Nico or the philanthropist and YouTuber and
well, I don't care about
owner.
his here's how to optimize your life. I don't care about that. I care about the psycho that he had to
Yeah.
he had to like drum up in order to beat Lewis, like his his bestie, and then realizing, I mean, just the storyline of it, that this guy best friends with, they come up together, they're karting together, they're there's that great clip of when they're both on their first podium together after Nico won his first race, and they're hugging and they're like, I love you so much.
There is a story about that year that will come out at some point, and Lewis has always said that he'll tell the story once he's retired, and I can't believe no one's asked Nico about it, because they must have done. But it was around that Spanish Grand Prix when they drove into each other and Max won his first race.
Right.
And they were in a meeting with Toto and Nicky for ages before they came out to the press to talk to us. And from that point on, both of them were just really different for the whole year. And I have no idea what was agreed or said in that meeting. I can have a guess. But, we still don't know the truth of what went down there. And that's still yet to come out.
Yeah, I've read somewhere that James Vowles was instrumental in like having these rules of engagement that was supposed to keep them from flying off the rails. I don't know how effective it turned out to be, but
yeah, it was, well, because then they made contact again in Hungary. Yeah, it was, or was that another year? I can't remember. Everything's merging into, I'm getting that age.
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
All the
all
years
sort of
starting
blends
to merge
together.
into one.
So you're the GP2, the press officer, and then you start doing commentary for GP2. Then you get this call from the States, from NBC.
Yeah.
And we got to get into this NBC little era of your career, and most specifically,
Florida Winter
most
Series.
importantly, that you competed in the Florida Winter Series.
Yes.
Why do people not talk about first of all, why don't you talk about this every day? Because
I do, but I just bore people with it.
This is your opportunity. For those of you who don't know,
yes,
Will motherfucking Buxton raced against Max Verstappen in his first year in cars.
Not only Max Verstappen,
Latifi,
Lance Stroll, Nicholas Latifi, to name, 3 future Formula One drivers, and amongst a wildly impressive, Antonio Fuoco, there was a lot of people in this.
Ed Jones, Tatiana Calderon. Yeah, great list of drivers.
Yes.
So this was kind of done as what, like a bit? Like it was like, Will's always wanted to be an F1 driver. Like, let's throw him in the cars. He's never driven these cars before. And then let's see how he does.
So the head of communications and marketing at Ferrari was really, really smart cookie and realized that NBC were getting the rights to Formula One, and let's do something let's put Will in our junior academy for this winter training ground that we've got for young drivers, despite the fact that Will is, at that point, I was 33. It's a decade ago. 33 years of age. Come out here and race these up-and-coming potential future talents. Yeah. And Max was literally straight out of karts. He was 16, I want to say 16, 15, 16.
So you guys were equal in experience in cars, pretty much.
In single seaters, Max had done, I think he'd done a wet test at Pembrey, and that was about it. Turn up, and
how much training did Ferrari Academy give you before you turn up?
So nothing, literally nothing. A friend of mine had a rig at his house, so I went and I drove a couple of laps of the track that I was going to drive, and then we went out there and I got in the simulator and tried it, and I'm braking 100 meters before I should. I'm not taking any speed through the corners. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a clue. I've never driven a single seater really before. So it was my first practice session. I think I was either 17 or 18 seconds off the pace. And then you're like, shit, okay. Second practice, I cut that down to about 9 seconds. Third practice, I was down to about 7 seconds. And then my drive shaft went. So, I didn't get to qualify. which meant that I should have been on reverse grid pole for the second race. And they were like, "Do you just want to start from the back?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll start from the back." Anyway, it was run by Luca Baldesseri, who was Michael Schumacher's race engineer. So he's, he knows his stuff. He's been there. And it was all open data. So you could see whatever anybody else was doing, what the drivers were doing. And, you got to see Max's overlays against, and some of these guys were like the cream of Formula 3 at the time. And here comes this precocious little brat out of karts. And he was quicker than all of them. And he was doing things with the car, and he was doing things through the corners that none of them could replicate. And he pissed a lot of people off, because I think for some of them at that point, they were like, they saw the writing on the wall. Now this kid is here. My future is going to look very, very different, because I thought I was the best, but I can't do what this kid does. And he has no experience, and I've got a bit. And it was, he put
so there was a buzz around him immediately.
Straight away. And it was obvious. It was just obvious. You just needed to watch his onboards, look at his data traces. It's a freaking magician.
But Will, one race, it seems, one event, it seems like you finished 10th and he finished 7th. So it feels like you were only 3 places behind him, according to Wikipedia.
Yeah, but I think that also equates to a lap. I did beat Latifi, though.
Yes,
on merit.
I'm going to say.
You did.
Yeah, I beat Latifi in a wet race, and I was still on slicks, and he finished behind me. And I remember when he signed for Williams, and the announcement was made that he signed for Williams, and we were in a club, and at the end of the season in Abu Dhabi, and he was up like in his little VIP little area, and I went up to him and I was like, "Congratulations!" And he was like, "Thanks so much, man. I can't wait for next year." And I was just like, "Listen, I'm just going to say this now, because I won't say it next year, but just remember, I beat you." And he was just like, "Yeah, fuck off." So that was great. And but yeah, Lance was my teammate, and was really lovely, and 10 years ago. But you look at it, you think back 10 years, February 2014 is when it happened. In that 10 years, you look at what Max has done. Completely changed the game. Yeah. It's astonishing in just 10 years.
What was his vibe? Because we have this amazing picture of you and him. And
he was a goofball. He was a total goofball. He was a kid, 16 years old.
What was his vibe then versus now? Like where are the similarities and where are the differences between like Max at 15 in Florida with you versus Max now, 3-time world champion? God.
I don't know. Like, what were you like at 16 and then at 25, 26? But it's like every decade, you think you've got it all sorted out. And then you go 10 years down the line and you look at yourself. I'm sitting here 43. I look at myself at 33 and think, oh man, what a dick. And I think about, talk about the guy who lived in the camper van.
Yeah.
If that guy turned up in the paddock now, I would be like, who's this dick?
Yeah.
But no, Max back then there was a real ease to him. There was an air of, this is just fun. It just came so easily to him. There was no pressure. There was no expectation. He was just there to learn, and have fun. And I liked him immediately. I just thought, nice kid, stupid amounts of talent, but very cool, very, very cool. And it was great because then 6 months later, he comes to the paddock in Spa, and no one really knows who he is, and he's literally just signed with Red Bull at this moment to be a Red Bull driver. And so NBC got the first interview with him because he was kind of like nervous and didn't know where to go and didn't know who to talk to, and sees me, and we were just like, hey, and so we got the first interview.
Wow, you were the first person to interview Max in the F1 paddock?
Once he'd signed for Red Bull, we got the first interview with him in Spa. But that was one of the really, again, it was one of the reasons that that I always spent so much time in the junior paddock. So when I first started in Formula One, I spent a lot of time in the Formula 3000 paddock. Formula 3000 became GP2, GP2 became Formula 2. And I always thought it was really important to spend time down there because that's where your next generation of drivers coming from, is where your superstars are going to come from. And I spent a long time commentating on GP2. And what became really lovely was the guys who'd graduate to F1. When I used to do the pen interviews for NBC, they knew I was a safe option. So if they came into the pen and they'd crashed out or whatever, and, they knew I wasn't going to roll them under the bus. I was going to treat them fairly. And so I would invariably be the first person they came up to so they could kind of brush the cobwebs off and be like, set themselves and then go off and get asked a hard question.
How do you strike that balance between, not wanting to burn a relationship, but also if
Yeah.
a guy acts like a dick on the track, how are you not? You gotta be objective in some.
You've got
regards.
to. Yeah, I remember once I really fired a tough question at Perez, and he kind of stuck back and kind of gave me this look like what where's this coming from? And I went to see him afterwards, and I was just like, I'm really sorry, but I had to ask you that, and you're there to do a job, and they're there to do a job, and they know that, they recognize that, so long as you're not shit canning them and talking crap, you've got to ask the hard questions, and you've got to tell the truth when it comes down to it, and if you're asked for your opinion on something, you have to give it and be honest. I remember after the first Drive to Survive came out, again, I ended up having breakfast with Checo, and he said, well, he said you were really harsh about my driving in Singapore. And I said, yeah, that's because you drove like shit. I was like, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, yeah. But yeah, I mean, Drive to Survive has been a big thing because now because everybody watches it. Before, if you'd written an opinion piece, or you'd done an editorial, or you'd said something on air or whatever, maybe they didn't see it, maybe they didn't hear it because it was it was going out in the States. Now if it's on Drive to Survive, you've kind of you've got to be answerable now.
Okay, let's get to the Drive to Survive. Okay, so you get the call, you're going to be on this Netflix thing called Drive to Survive.
Yeah.
You're like, Mercedes isn't doing it, and Ferrari's not doing it season one. They're like, we don't want. Please, absolutely not. We can't be bothered with your little show.
Couldn't possibly squeeze it into our schedule, right?
Yeah.
So you get called in to do this. What's your expectation going into this thing?
My expectation was that I would be doing the interviews because so Sean Bratches was complete genius, ran marketing, promotions, all that at Formula One in the early days of Liberty. Absolute visionary, amazing guy. And he's just like, yo, Will. And I was like, yeah. He's like, so we're doing this Netflix thing. I need you to go in and do the interviews. I was like, whatever you need, Sean, absolutely. Because, Sean tells you to jump and you say how high because he's just that kind of guy. But he said, I need you to go in and do interviews for this Netflix series. I was like, okay, cool. Thinking I'm going to be sat behind the camera interviewing the drivers, which is what I do every weekend. And I get there and they sit me down and the camera's pointing at me. And I'm like, oh, which is why in the early interviews in season one, like I'm literally there in like a zip up kind of jumper thing. I haven't, like today, I haven't shaved. I'm looking a bit tatty. I was not expecting to be there.
Did they start putting makeup on you, and you're like, "Well, I'm good. I don't need."
I've never had makeup.
Yeah,
not once. This is all natural. Yeah, and then they start asking me questions, and because I wasn't expecting it, they asked me the question, and I take my time to think, of an answer that's not gonna get me in shit, and that's where that very kind of syncopated, drawn out, because as you can hear, that's not how I talk.
Right.
But it came from that of like, I don't want to fuck this up. I don't want to get myself in trouble. I don't want to piss anybody off. And I don't want to say the wrong thing, and I don't want to sound like an idiot. And it came out like that, and now that's how I talk on Netflix, apparently.
It's literally
it's
just a slow motion panic attack is what
It's
it is.
Yeah, basically that's what it is.
It's like when a character on season 1 decides that like they're always gonna wear like a certain prop, and then at season 7 you're like, I guess I'm wearing the rubber ducky on my shoulder of every costume that I wear. That's my thing. That's what I do.
So this drama that I always felt you were imbuing everything with is really just an internal struggle that you're having with yourself.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly
Wow!
it. You are literally witnessing the cogs turn.
Yeah.
That is.
Okay, but so the first season happens, you're just being asked these questions about these certain things, and you're very slowly, meticulously weighing it in. And we all think it's a performative choice, but it's not. but now it is. So now, but now you know what it is. So like, how do you approach it now?
Yeah.
Like, what's the process now? You're like,
because you give a sound bite. I mean, the spoon thing fucking destroyed the internet this year. And,
But that's just The Simpsons.
really?
Right.
Like, do you remember? So the episode where it's like my favorite episode of The Simpsons when they go to Australia.
Yeah.
And do you remember Crocodile Dundee?
Of course.
Yeah.
So and he goes, and the guy on the street, he's like, give me your money, and pulls out a knife, and Crocodile Dundee
He goes, that's not a knife.
He goes, that's not a knife, that's a knife. And then, so in the Simpsons episode, they're sitting. Bart buys a penknife, and he's playing with it, and then this Australian guy in the pub goes, that's not a knife, this is a knife, and he pulls out a spoon, and Bart goes, that's not a knife, that's not a knife, that's a spoon, and the guy goes, I see you've played knifey spoony before, and that was in that moment, it just the Simpsons episode came into my head, so that's where that came from. But no, but similar thing, like I don't get a list of questions. Right. People think that it's scripted, or that I get a list of questions or whatever. I do 5 or 6 sittings a year from the start of the season through to the end, and each one invariably lasts between 4 and 5 hours of just being asked questions in that chair. You get my arse has fallen asleep within the first sort of 60 minutes,
right?
And you're just sitting there drinking coffee, drinking water for 5 hours, trying to answer questions and trying to explain for the 75th time that qualifying means that the fastest guy starts on pole and the other 19 start behind them. And that's, but you know what? Like, if you've never watched this before, if you've never watched Formula One before, let's say you come to it from the Olympics and you're used to watching the 100 meters. Usain Bolt qualifies with the fastest time. Does he start a meter ahead of the guy who's second quickest, who starts a meter ahead of the guy who's third? No, because that doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Right.
So why does it happen in this sport?
Yeah.
Right. No, I think it's funny because I think you do explain things very well. I think the people that kind of come like have fun with it are the people that are just like, well, I know all this shit already, and it's like, okay, but I didn't when I first watched this thing, and I've had to explain qualifying. Now being someone who has to explain this shit to people, I'm like, God damn, can you just go watch all of Will Buxton's season 1 Drive to Survive
mega mix.
soundbite?
Watch my agent has made a mega mix of all my bits on. It's 38 minutes of me stating the bloody obvious. It's brilliant.
Oh, Vankers! This episode is brought to you by BetMGM. As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season, and we'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. For the upcoming races, you can bet on which drivers will be P1 in each free practice. Listen! We know who's going to win the race. It's Max Verstappen unless his tire literally goes up in flames. But guess what? FP1, FP2, FP3. Sometimes Alex Albon's on pole, and we don't know why. But maybe you could, and you could bet on that for every race. You can bet on quali. You can bet on who's going to win, you can bet on the season at large. And if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code DADDY, and you will get up to $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. You download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code DADDY, because we're fun, just DADDY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game or race. You can also bet on other things besides F1, but We all know why you're here. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code DADDY when you sign up. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code DADDY and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the United States. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 for New York. Call 1-800-327-5050 for Massachusetts. 21 and over only. Please gamble responsibly. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP for Arizona. 1-800-BETS-OFF for Iowa. 1-800-981-0023 for Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customer only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. You're so good at explaining things about Formula One. We were wondering if you would do us an honor and maybe explaining some other things.
Oh, of course. Oh God.
I don't know if you tell us if you've seen these things. Have you seen Game of Thrones?
Yes, I have.
Okay, cool. Can you explain what it means to be a Lannister?
Oh. If you're a Lannister, you have complex relationships with your siblings.
I see it now. Just cut to them.
Yeah, literally episode 1.
Yeah. Okay. Have you seen Succession?
Yes.
Okay. In Succession, what does it mean to be the CEO in the Roy family?
If you're CEO of the Roy family, you're the chief executive officer.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen?
Yes. That's giving the people what they want. Yeah.
Even my daughter now, I can't say anything to my daughter because she's just like, whatever, Dad, you're just a meme.
Wow, what's crazy is like Gen Z kids, they'll say like, "Oh, you're being a meme right now. You're literally a meme. Like you are literally a meme."
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's great. She's awesome. She's awesome.
Dad, you're literally a meme right now.
Dad, you're literally a meme. That's crazy. Wow, crazy.
That's beautiful. Well, I want to get a little bit into like what's going on in F1 now.
Okay.
Talk about like the landscape, what's happening now. Like, I guess where should we start? Okay, you know what? Let's start with a little bit of the Carlos Sainz.
Okay.
Carlos Sainz right now. You know, he's
so hot right now.
He's so hot right now. He's in his like single boy era. He's like, I'm on the market and everyone wants me. We have a complicated relationship with him because we're Charles fanboys, and we kind of feel like we play with this. Yeah, you know, we play with this. Is Carlos overrated? Is he underrated? Is he appropriately rated? Where do you see that within? You know, how do you see him in the F1 space?
So I never, and I Carlos knows this because we've spoken about it. I never, in his junior Formula days, I never imagined he would become the driver that he is today or have the longevity that he's had. I didn't actually think he'd make it to Formula One. But since he has, I mean, people forget very quickly how well he compared to Max when they were teammates at Toro Rosso.
Max was 12 years old.
and you got 10th and he got 7th like a month earlier.
you know, if you're ready, you're ready. And look, I think Carlos is phenomenal, and there might be the question mark at the moment of whether Ferrari have kept hold of the right driver, or whether they needed to change drivers at all, whether they're actually upgrading or not, in getting rid of Carlos, who is still on the upwards trajectory and who we might not have seen the most out of yet. They lose him now to go where? Because the options could be plentiful. They could be very minimal, and it all depends on what other drivers do. And it is going to be one of the most tumultuous and uncertain driver markets that I think the sport's ever known, because there is so many unknowns.
But Will, what percentage of this comes from like, oh, we needed a storyline this week, and Carlos had a better week than Leclerc, so we got to ask this question: is Carlos Sainz a better driver than Lewis Hamilton? For 1 week or 2 weeks, we got to do it just because. And it's like everybody forgets, that Leclerc has a ton of races that are better than Carlos Sainz, and it's just like we just kind of take these stories 1 week at a time just because we have to have something to talk about. But it gets kind of annoying to me.
I see. Look, I see that, and look, Ferrari have the data. And so Ferrari aren't going to get rid of the guy who's the best. And of course, you sign Lewis with half an opportunity because he's Lewis. The Carlos thing is fascinating, though, because it seems now that he's got a car at his disposal that he feels comfortable in, suddenly it's starting to come to him. And perhaps he hasn't had that before. Hasn't found himself in that comfortable scenario because Lewis is in a very uncomfortable scenario at the moment. And you can't say that we are seeing the best of Lewis Hamilton week in, week out, because we're not. Right. Because there is an uncomfortable driver and he is potentially the greatest that there has ever been. But we're not seeing that greatness every weekend because the comfort level isn't there. So how much of the potential that exists within Carlos has been hidden? How much of the potential that exists within Charles has been hidden? We won't know until we see them properly fight. And I think partnering Lewis with Charles is the best thing that Ferrari could do because Charles needs to pitch himself against a world champion and needs to have a world champion as a teammate because there will be huge elements of what Lewis brings to the table that Charles will not have yet. And he will learn from him. And it's not just about pitching yourself against the best; it's about learning from the best. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths that Ferrari will get from Lewis going there is that transfer of knowledge.
As someone who's kind of like up close and personal with these guys, do you sometimes see like, oh, this person and this person are not going to get on, and they're going to be teammates. That's going to be fireworks. Like you understand, you see them on you understand their personalities a bit better. Like you spent that time with Nico. I'm sure you weren't the most shocked when Nico and Lewis were kind of like battling it out and fighting. No. Like how do you see Charles and Lewis getting on?
They'll be fine.
Yeah,
they'll be absolutely fine. We were already joking about it. They're going to do a duet. Lewis is going to produce it, maybe do some singing. Charles is going to play piano. It's going to be great. It's going to be beautiful. They're going to have an album out. It's going to be cool. No, I mean, yeah, I think there are ones where you expect it to go worse than it does, like Fernando at Aston Martin. I think everyone, myself included, just assumed that within the first 5 months, Lawrence Stroll and Fernando would come to blows and there would be the big nuclear button would get pushed and the whole thing would explode. And that hasn't happened, which has, I think, surprised everybody. Everyone who thought, Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris are going to be best mates and it's going to be banter city. I remember when that lineup was announced, we were all sitting there going, this is actually going to be quite awkward and quite needly because, there's a serious aspect that sits behind both of them, and they're not going to be these Bezzy mates because one of them has to come out on top. So that's been interesting.
Well, that gets me to the Lewis and Leclerc question because Carlos Sainz has always been the bridesmaid, never been the bride. So it's kind of always undertook that one drive, maybe not second driver, but 1A driver role. Yeah. Whereas Lewis is not necessarily a downgrade from Sainz by any means, but I think my concern would be is like now you have two guys. Only one of them is going to come out on top. Neither one of them can live with the second driver status. No. So I think, so how if you're Fred Vasseur, how do you get your mind around this idea that now you have two number one drivers on your lineup?
I think you just have to promise them parity, that they will both have the same car, they will both have the same opportunities, that if upgrades are coming, you either bounce 1-1 and then the other one gets the first one next time round, or that they don't bring the upgrade until there's enough for both of them. Or you say to Charles, look, he's a 7-time world champion and he's going to come in as number one. And you just have to suck this up and use this opportunity to learn from him and this is your team. This will always be your team. You're going to be here for the long term. Lewis is going to be here for 2-3 seasons. It's a difficult one, but then Lewis and Fred go way back. Like they go way back to Formula 3.
Right.
So I think if it comes down to it, there is one reason why Lewis is going to Ferrari and one reason why Fred wants Lewis at Ferrari. And that is Fred wants to bring the championship back to Ferrari and Lewis wants to win his 8th. Yeah. So there is absolutely no shadow of a doubt. Lewis is not going there to be the support act for Charles Leclerc's title aspirations. He's going there to win the title. That's it. It's really could not be simpler. And as with all of the big teams, if you don't favor one driver over another, then you can start taking points off each other.
Right.
And Ferrari, they have this weird tendency to certainly over the last few years, even with Fred there last year, there were occasions when, Carlos would be on the softer tyre, but would be behind Charles. And you're like, well, just put the team order in and move Charles out of the way and let Carlos go. And they didn't do it. So you're like, well, if you're going to make a decision like that, stick to it and make it work and give the guy the opportunity. But the question mark for me now is where does Carlos go? And there are either a myriad of options, or there's like 2.
Gun to your head. Gun to my head
right now.
Where's he going?
Yeah.
If it's gun to my head, I'd say Sauber.
Okay.
Wow. You don't think he can wrangle a Merc seat or a Red Bull?
So Mercedes is not happening. Antonelli's going to Mercedes. There's no for me. I think Toto's made his mind up. Yeah, I think Toto's made his mind up. He wants Antonelli in the seat.
No Williams.
No, he's pissed that he missed the opportunity to give Max the opportunity back in 2014. So yeah, you put Antonelli in the seat. The litmus test was Behrman. Behrman did the job. Okay, great. So we can stick a kid straight in from Formula 2. Let him go. 25 is a write-off for them anyway until the new regulations in 26. So you bring him in, no pressure, get him to know the team, get him to work with George, understand what Mercedes are all about. Bam, new car, new regulations in 2026, go for the title. Go and have a run at it. If you put him in a Williams at 25 and then you bring him into Mercedes with the expectation in 26,
right, they're going
he's got to relearn everything, everyone, how it operates, and you've spent a year with Williams. No, bring him in straight away and get him to learn at the top table.
George is going to be so resentful. He's going to be like, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
I did 3 years in Williams. This is fucking what?
Yeah. I don't think if Max leaves Red Bull, I don't think he's going to Mercedes. I think he'd go to Aston because he'd want. Well, because Aston Martin get the Honda engines. And one of the major reasons that Max might be looking for a way out of Red Bull, way beyond any of the fallout, the personal fallouts, is if the Red Bull powertrain is not showing the numbers for Ford that they were hoping or expecting. So you would, I would imagine, try to go to the team that is going to have the Honda engines as the factory unit, and that would be Aston Martin, who have also, we believe, just made an astronomical approach for Adrian Newey, as everyone is at the moment.
Right. Who would you put in pole position for having Newey in 26?
Right now, Red Bull stays as it is, unless that big shiny nuclear button gets pushed, and then it's open season. But that's the thing. So if the nuclear button doesn't get hit, I think the driver market stays pretty stable. I think Checo probably stays at Red Bull with Max. Fernando stays at Aston Martin because he's not going to go to Mercedes because Antonelli's got that seat and he's not going to go to Red Bull. So he stays at Aston Martin, and if he doesn't stay at Aston Martin, that he retires. The only way it gets shaken up is if Max leaves Red Bull and then the whole thing goes nuclear.
But you don't see that happening?
I could see it happening.
Yeah, okay.
Whether it will or not. And here's the thing. If you'd asked me this question in Bahrain, I would have said, no way, it's locked in. You asked me that question in Saudi Arabia, it would have been 100% yes. Then you ask me the question in Australia, and you're like, maybe, maybe not. It's changing. It's not even changing week by week. It's changing day by day. The way that this whole thing is flowing is quite incredible. I've never known anything like it.
So in all your years, you've never seen anything like this in terms of the temperature changes. There's so much going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So much we can't talk about.
Yeah.
And some that we can, which is the polemics and the politics of who's running what, the power within the organization that the Verstappens have, the positioning of Helmut Marko. All of these things are interlinked.
Right.
Okay, can we get a preview? Can we get a
fascinating.
preview for DTS season 8? How you're going to do it?
No, next season, season 7.
Oh, sorry. Okay, you know what I mean.
Is it? I don't know.
Okay,
He's deflecting.
I don't know. I don't know what they're going to ask me yet.
Attack right now, so you can do it really well.
Yeah, no, you can. This is like you rerehearse with us, and then when you're there, you've got the sound bites ready
Things
to go.
at Red Bull are complicated right now.
Yeah, I think
If
it'll be like,
you would have
like
a
that.
Facebook status, it would say it's complicated with Red
It's
Bull.
complicated. Exactly. Why do I sound like Donald Trump when you do an impression of me? That's weird.
All my impressions sound like Donald Trump.
Yeah. Like, all right, the appendix race, right? Carlos doesn't have the appendix. What do you bring in? How are you teeing up the ball? So
He
that
might be under contract. He might be under contract.
Yeah, how are you teeing that one up? I think it's probably like I'm gonna have to look up what an appendix does first and foremost and explain that.
Yeah,
and then probably explain that it weighs about 100 grams, which is the equivalent of 3,000ths a second a lap. The rest of it is Carlos, clearly. that extra speed. Yeah. My God, what a brilliant performance, though. That was great.
Well, they're going to need you more than ever this year because what's happening on track is pretty dull. So it's going to have to be a lot about, which is also what we love about the world and what we love about DTS is that it's like, it's all this, the rest of this shit.
And this is a great thing with
fascinating.
DTS is, and it has always been, if you get in a year where you don't maybe get a ton of great races, you get a great DTS. If
Yes, 2021 was a weaker DTS
because there was so much on track to focus on, but you already knew what kind of happened on track. It's the looking behind the scenes is when you get those really great moments.
Now the question is, on this year's Drive to Survive, are you going to bring a little bit more of the Will Buxton fashion into the interview room? Because we see what you rock. We see what you're rocking. I mean,
I'm actually wearing my Drive to Survive jumper today. It was completely unintentional.
But we see the wrist. We see the bracelets.
Can we get a walkthrough of the bracelets?
These are all different stones that bring different things, peace and serenity and calm and all of that.
Okay.
This is a bracelet that my eldest daughter bought for me. This was a little silver thing that I had made when my eldest was born with her initials on it. So I've been wearing that for 14 years now. And this was a birthday present from my youngest, my 9-month-old. So, and that has her name on it. So,
wow. So your arm is just going to be, you're going to have just,
there was
look like
a time,
Darth Vader. And by
there was
the end
a time when it went, it went up to there.
Right.
There were other ones. There was a time when I had probably about 4 inches worth of beads on there.
We've seen the pics. We've seen the pics. Now here's the question: when are you going to rock this this marching band jacket?
Now,
when is that making its way into
tell us the thought process here.
Just a massive My Chemical Romance fan. No, the Mexican Grand Prix were having a 60s throwback weekend in the paddock. And so if you wore fancy dress to the party on the Thursday, you stood a chance of winning an all expenses paid trip to Mexico, a holiday. And so I decided, screw it, I'm going to do it every day. So I had different inspirations day by day. One of them was actually a perfect replica of the you call it like a vest, like a sweater vest that Paul McCartney wore on Magical Mystery Tour. So I had that. But for Sunday, I decided to go as Jimi Hendrix. So I got this marching band type uniform thing from the internet, scuffed it up a lot. You can buy like the aging sprays and stuff that they use on film sets. So I put that on it. But then I needed the lining, so I bought some faux kind of cheetah fur and sewed that on the inside.
Well,
so
you put some work into this.
Yeah, this was
damn right I did, and I made sure, because I made sure that it was, and then black shirt and black jeans, because there's a famous photo of Hendrix somewhere in London with that exact outfit on. So I made sure I rocked the precise Jimi Hendrix outfit for the day.
love it.
So was this probably the most thought you put into a fit, or what was the most thought you ever put into a fit?
It was about 38 degrees centigrade, so I didn't put that much thought into it, because I then had to run from the grid to the commentary box and sweated my ass off and barely made it in time for lights out. I was so out of breath. So yeah, I could have maybe put more thought into that and possibly worn that on Saturday for qualifying.
It's beauty is pain.
What about this?
It's Mexico again. The guys they're so thoughtful. They made me a jean jacket for my 300th Grand Prix.
Wow.
I see.
Yeah.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah. They're so sweet in Mexico.
Yeah.
They're absolutely amazing. But yeah, it was very cool. I love that you've searched Will Buxton bracelets.
Yeah, then we got the bracelets, but you've already explained the bracelets. So we you put a little bit of effort into the fits.
I try
to make it. I mean, you've done 300 of these races, so you got to spice it up. I'm assuming.
I know. But I have a lovely. I have a partnership. I have an ambassadorial role now with Psycho Bunny. So that makes it so much easier to figure out what I'm going to wear weekend by weekend. Because every time they have a new drop, I'm just like, I want that and that and that and that and that and that and that, which is great. It's super easy, because I'm a 40-year-old man. I'm basically back to being a child again. I wear whatever my wife puts out on the bed for me to wear.
All right, we're gonna hit you with a few just like off the cuff, like just rapid fire. Some questions. Okay, who of the current grid hates giving interviews the most?
Lance Stroll.
Who enjoys giving interviews the most?
Who enjoy giving me interviews, or just interviews in general?
Being interviewed.
I think. Probably. Sorry, this is supposed to be quick fire, isn't it? I'm not doing very well.
Take your time.
I would normally say Daniel, but I don't think he enjoys being interviewed at the moment because he's having an absolute horror show. So probably Carlos.
Speaking of Carlos, what's Carlos Sainz's hair like in real life?
Much fluffier than it looks on telly.
Wow, even fluffier. Jesus.
It looks fluffy on the telly.
You have to like sit on your hands to be like, don't touch it. Don't touch it.
A little bit. Just like, don't. He's just a beautiful human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's the most famous person that you've interviewed?
Oh, great question. The most famous person I've ever interviewed would be Katy Perry?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yeah. It's pretty up there. Who on the current grid has the best banter?
Daniel. Of course.
Yeah. That checks out. If you had to ask Lando Norris like one off, like not driving related question, what's one thing that you want to key in with Lando?
I did for a radio show that I was doing last year. I asked him a bunch of questions that went out on the radio show but never went out beyond that, and I wanted to do an interview with him about it again. He started DJing, right? And he was talking about how being mates with Martin Garrix and DJing, how it's brought him this real kind of inner peace, but how he'd been talking to Garrix about reading a room and learning to drop the right tune at the right time. And he was making this comparison between reading a room and dropping the right tune to being on a wet track and trying to find grip. and it was fascinating about how you read it and how you have to be conscious, and how you, when you're zoned in, it kind of slows down and you're in this very kind of zoned place and very kind of meditative
He was like,
space.
if only I had DJ'd before Sochi.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
I'm good on I don't need the wets. I'm good on the slicks. Shut up. Dude, just drop the beat at the right time. Dude.
Yeah, he can't beat match. That's if Sochi's anything to go by, he can't beat match. That's it.
What's the wildest thing that's happened while you're live on air?
Owen Wilson was a complete prick to me. So we were on air on Speed Channel.
He says, "Will, fuck off." Wow.
You sound like Jennifer Coolidge.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Oh my God, you do. So I was working for Speed Channel at the time, and David Hobbs was the driver analyst, as he was with NBC as well. And Cars 2, 3, whichever one it was, had come out. And so we were doing this setup where Owen Wilson was going to have a back and forward with David Hobbs, because David was in it would have been Cars 2. David Hobbs was in the film as David Hobbs Cap. So all to promote the film anyway. Yeah. So Owen's standing by, blah, 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 blah. They throw it down to me and I'm like, yeah, I'm standing by here with, Lightning McQueen, blah, 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 blah. And he just looks at the camera, looks at me and just walks off. And we're live, and I was the one that was going to go, wow. But it was.
He was crazier than a road lizard.
Like, what do you do? So I was just had to throw it back to the studio. I was like, okay, guys, don't know what that was about. You guys take it, and I had to throw it back. So that was wild. I don't know why that happened.
Yeah.
It was very, very weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably the weirdest thing.
I'm like, that's Martin Brundle's Sunday morning, just doing the gridlock.
But it wasn't like we doorstepped him.
Right.
Like, it had all been organized. Like, I think it was probably organized with the PR company for the movie. It was like, what is going on? You're just you're in the and at that moment, like, because it's live TV, you're in the twilight zone, and you're just standing there.
Yeah.
I'm just a dickhead with a microphone at that point. Like, I've got, what do I do?
Yeah.
That's an alt for your autobiography.
That's tough. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough.
Oh man.
Wow.
That's tough. That's tough.
Okay, if you had to do a DTS for any season, you could go back and be Will Buxton on any season in history.
So 94 is the season that made me want to do this. And just the everything, the tragedy, the controversy, the conclusion, the final race, the Michael and Damon, that would be,
oh my God,
that would be a real, or Lewis's 08 title year. I mean, God, the ups and the downs of that, or the year before with McLaren getting caught with the dossier and Ron Dennis having to shape Max Mosley's hand. That kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? It was amazing. But it's the whole those whole 2 seasons were absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
absolutely incredible.
But what sucks about not having, I know this is a crazy, very DTS fan thing to say, is what sucks about not having DTS for those years is you'll never really know the weird little stories behind the scenes. All you know is what happened on track.
And yet, 20 years after Senna's death, out comes the Senna movie. With all of this behind the scenes stuff, interviews that had been done at the time, footage that has been recorded, that had been put in a vault somewhere, that was found, that was brought out. Incidentally, Senna made by the same people who make Drive to Survive. It's the same team.
Yeah.
And that's where they honed their craft. It's I still think there's scope to get these things, in a little bit more time, maybe give it another 5-10 years, maybe we'll get something on 2008 or 2007, 2008, which would be it really would be incredible. And now we're seeing the the Brawn documentary coming out, the '09 one. I think there's probably scope to get it done.
When's our next competitive season coming?
Look, we're 3 races in. We've had 2 winners in 3 races.
I go.
I'm a glass half full kind of guy.
You gotta be. So how do you keep? You've been in this game a long time. You've been in the game for Schumacher. You've been in the game for Vettel and Hamilton, and now Verstappen.
Yeah. It's almost like these periods of domination are like normal.
Yeah.
It's almost like this happens all the time.
Yeah.
So how do you keep yourself? Because we got tricked. We got in 2021. With bait and switch.
Tricked.
Yeah. So how do you? How do you?
You got suckered in by Max winning it at the last minute, and you're like,
yeah. I mean,
all he does is win now. Did we break it?
Yeah. That is, well, the guy that you beat broke it.
Yeah.
The man who you beat in 2014.
Yes. Hey,
imagine if they'd given me the
Will
seat.
Buxton had been in that Williams seat and not Nicholas Latifi. Maybe Lewis would have his 8th.
Yeah, that's right.
Look, I think so. You had the new regulations, and they were supposed to really shake it up. And the mad thing is if you look behind Red Bull for the last 2 seasons, it was so unpredictable every single weekend. Would it be Ferrari or Aston Martin or Mercedes or McLaren? And you didn't know. And it's just because Red Bull did such a shit hot job of it that they ran away with it. But everything behind them was doing exactly what the regulations were supposed to do, like exactly what they were supposed to do. So we've got, normally when you have regulations that stay static for a long time, the top team will hit a ceiling and everybody else will then just catch up to them. But we've got a very quick turnaround in regulations now because there's a new set of regulations in 2026. So that will possibly represent a reset as well. And who would have thought after a decade in which Mercedes won pretty much everything that they would get the set of regulations, the last set of regulations, so completely and utterly wrong.
Yeah.
And you could never have predicted that, nor that it would take them so long to figure out they got it wrong. And then
I looked at Toto Wolff. And I said, I don't know about this guy.
Nah, after like the 9 championships and
well, the thing is I just got. It's like, okay, you bought your way into the team. He takes a lot of races off. He's not like Fred Vasseur, right, or one of these guys who just like has lived and breathed this thing his whole fucking life.
I would argue very strongly against that. Toto was a racer himself. Actually, there's good YouTube footage of Toto racing. There's YouTube footage of Toto absolutely totaling a car on the Nordschleife.
Oh yeah.
Trying to break some stupid record.
Yeah,
Porsche in like a Porsche 911.
And Nicky chewed him out for it. It was just like, what the hell do you think you were doing? Toto has been, Toto is dyed-in-the-wool racer. He lives and breathes it, and what he created at Mercedes, just the ethic of it, I think, and the.
So what's going on? 3 years of this shit.
Yeah, I know they've made essentially, it's what these regulations were supposed to do, which is that if you're a big team and you screw it up, you can't just spend money and create a second car and go back and start winning again. It takes you time. If you take a misstep, you can't just catch it back. Okay, the fact they keep misstepping is a major.
It's not been one misstep.
Issue.
It's been a couple of missteps, and now Lewis jumping ship.
But with the next set of regulations, what's to say Red Bull don't get it wrong? and Mercedes get it right, or Red Bull get it wrong and McLaren get it really right.
Is it a situation where in the new regs it's going to be more engine dependent than it was? Because part of it hasn't it been that that Mercedes had this dominant engine, that the Red Bull had the Renault engine that was shit and bricks and wasn't up to snuff, and the downforce didn't really mean as much, and the aero of the car didn't mean as much. Is that where 2026 is headed?
So at the moment, we're not entirely sure because the regulations haven't been finalized. So wait and see on that. But ultimately, they will have taken the learnings from this last set of regulations and will put it into that. The idea is, I think, always now to try to make the cars a bit smaller, a bit lighter, a bit more nimble, simplify the power units, and just get it exciting, good overtaking, good racing. There is, interestingly, from what I saw, I think in one of the, I think something came out the other day, there's the potential of a push to pass, maybe something like that.
Oh my God.
So that might be quite fun. But I'm not sure if that was an April Fool. I don't think it was.
Sure. Well, it wasn't an April Fool that you were actually on this podcast.
It's been fun, guys. Have we come to full time?
Yeah.
I mean,
unless if you have anything else you want to get off your chest, anything crazy that you want to say that you're like, F1 is kind of stifling me.
There's so much I want to say. When I've quit,
the book,
tell-all.
the tell-all book is going to be serious.
Oh, speak, not the tell-all book, but the book.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Get it up. Get it up there.
I got to give that a plug. Grand Prix comes out.
Grand Prix.
Middle of August 2024 in all good bookstores. And even not very good bookstores.
Wow.
Yeah. That's been fun. That's been huge fun. So basically, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about new fans coming in. How do you catch up 75 years of the sport that you haven't witnessed? And my hope for that book is that it does that. So it's the entire history of Formula One, everything back to the start, but in easily digestible, easy to understand chunks. It's not big and scary and anything. It's literally just like every champion, every decade, the great teams, the great races, everything.
Wow. How long did that take you?
Took a year of solid writing. I started it on my honeymoon this time last year.
That must have gone over well.
Actually, my wife was okay with it. It was great. We were in the Maldives, and I just spent the mornings just kind of like sat looking out into the ocean, typing for a couple of hours, and she sat in the pool with some champagne, and that was great. So it was good fun. Yeah, but it's been
labor.
huge. I know, right? But it's been huge fun doing that, and I really can't wait for it to. Can't wait for it to come out.
Are you gonna do the audiobook and the Drive to Survive voice? There's big expectations.
I mean, it's 240 pages, so that'll be like War and Peace if I read it that slowly. We could have it as an insomnia cure.
Yeah.
Right.
Send people to sleep if I read it really slowly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
We start this pod. We say "Vasat Vankas" as an ode to
Gunther.
This guy that used to work in Formula One.
Man, it's mad, isn't it? All the OGs are leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're the oldest kid at the school now. You're like. But you look amazing. Yeah. We started off with that. You look fantastic.
I have to come back and do resits every year. I've been held back a couple of years. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, could you honor us with a goodbye, Vankas?
See, I can only do Toto. I can't do.
Okay, we'll take it.
I can do Toto. Toto's because I did Toto because when my daughter was little, I read her the Roald Dahl books, and she really liked the witches, and the grandmother was supposed to have this Eastern European accent. So I always tried to sound like Toto when I was the grandmother because it was the only way I could get the accent the same every night. because she was like, "Oh my darling, I can't believe they've turned you into a mouse."
Who has a target on their backs next year?
Everybody. I love him. Toto's great. Come on, he's the best. So what is it? Goodbye, wankers.
Yeah.
So long, wankers.
He did it.
You said you were going to do it like Toto, and then you.
Okay. Goodbye, wankers. Vankers. Is it vankers? Goodbye, vankers.
Yes.
We said there's no wrong way to do it.
There's no wrong way to do it. Goodbye, Vankers.
Goodbye, Vankers.
Bye, Vankers.